Divine laws. Sin. BD0730 from January 1, 1939, taken from book number 15. An eternal law determines the guidelines for all thought and action, namely the use of all strength is required for the strictest observance of the divine commandments, which in turn are only the clear requirements that correspond to the divine order and therefore always adapt to the natural laws given by God. A law issued, so to speak, by the highest lawgiver is therefore also the guideline for all thought and action, which must conform to the divine requirements if it is to correspond to God's will. Every deviation or contravention must therefore be recognized and perceived as injustice or sin. Likewise, fitting in with the divine order must have such an effect that inner contentment and unmistakable spiritual progress are the result of a walk on earth that is pleasing to God and observes His laws. Where no attention is paid to the laws given by God, an unstable state very soon results, which understandably expresses itself in the opposite way. In spiritual blindness, an undeveloped inner life and a serious lack of hope with regard to a blissful life in the beyond following life on earth. However, if the earthly child is always mindful to always carry out its thoughts and actions in accordance with God's intended order, its spiritual state will become increasingly lighter and clearer, and it will now also be able to distinguish the extent to which all creation is subject to divine laws, i.e., which task is intended for each work of creation and why acting contrary to God's commandments has such serious consequences. For it must soon realize that no being can violate God's orders without suffering serious spiritual harm. The human being certainly has the freedom of will to oppose these instructions, but then at his own responsibility and risk, and in the foreseeable future no being will be able to disregard the laws without harming its soul, for in the short time on earth it only ever has to endeavor to comply with all requirements of the eternal deity if the soul is to be able to register a notable advantage for itself. Only a complete acknowledgement of the divine laws and a consciously joyful observance of God's commandments can bring about the soul's maturity, as it is willed by God Himself. That the earthly child comes close to Him and becomes worthy of His love and grace. Amen.